Hi, my name is Javier Albornoz, and today we'll be talking about virtual instruments in Pro Tools. We'll go through file setup, creating and working with instrument tracks, creating and working with MIDI tracks, and we'll take a look at MIDI controller lanes. MIDI is the acronym for Musical Instrument Digital Interface. It is a technical standard for communications protocol, digital interface, and connectors that was developed in 1981. A single MIDI cable is a 5-pin cable that carries 16 channels of data, and it can include note on or off, pitch data, velocity, which translates to volume or loudness of an individual MIDI event, vibrato, panning, tempo, etc. This data can be assigned to any instrument so that a variety of sounds can be produced as audio. And a very useful feature, MIDI files can transfer data between DAWs or digital audio workstations. Let's start with a blank Pro Tools session and add our instrument tracks. So the first thing you'll do is go to Track, New, and we're going to create an instrument track. We'll choose stereo because most virtual instruments are stereo as opposed to mono. Here we're going to choose Instrument Track, and you'll see that it automatically changes to the time base of ticks, the musical time base, as opposed to samples, which is normally what we use with audio tracks. We'll name this instrument. We'll add a 1 and click Create. So you can see here that we have our lone instrument track. But before I get started, I am going to add a master track, which is normal for any session that we're working in. Stereo. We'll choose Master Fader. It'll stay in time base of samples, and we'll leave the name Master. Create. And now we do have our master track where anything we create will sum to this track. So let's go ahead and start by loading our first instrument. So you can see here that an instrument track looks very similar to audio tracks or even aux input tracks that we've seen in other tutorials. But here, what you're going to place as an insert is actually the VST instrument or the virtual instrument. So we'll go to multi-channel plugin and we'll find the instrument category where the instruments you have on your computer will appear. So let's choose this particular synth, and the synth will pop up. We will choose a patch to work with. And the first thing that you need to do to be able to hear some sound out of this patch is record enable. You can see here to the left of the solo and mute button, we have this record button, and this actually isn't going to begin recording any material, but it just enables this track so that any MIDI data we enter through our MIDI controller is going to be recorded on this specific instrument track. So I'll press that. You can see that now it flashes signifying that it is enabled. So when I play anything on my MIDI controller, you'll hear the output of this synth. Great, so you can see level showing up here in the instrument corresponding audio channel for this instrument track. So what if we wanted to record some music but needed a metronome? So there is a way to add a click track or metronome. It's also under track, and we create click track. So there's our click track. I'm going to lower the volume of that a little bit and move it above our master so that it just ends up on our fader here to the left of the master. And so now when we hit play, you will hear the click at the BPM selected. In this case, it's 120 beats per minute. So there's our click. So let's go ahead and record some material to that click, and then we'll add another synth and see how that works. So in order to record, I am going to press the record button, and you can see that it's flashing, meaning it's armed and ready to record. And when we hit play, you'll hear the click, and we will be recording anything on any track that is record enabled. In this case, our instrument 1 track is the one record enabled. Great. So now we've recorded. I'm going to mute my click track. I'm going to unrecord enable, and I'll double click on the MIDI event that was recorded. And now what you're going to see is the piano roll editor. Sometimes it's called the key editor. But essentially what you have on your y-axis is your piano signifying each note. And of course, on your x-axis is your timeline. So you can see each note that I recorded, it corresponds to, in this case, we are on beat 1 of the second bar. And you can see that if there's some places where maybe I wanted to drag certain things out, or maybe have them land on a different beat, we can do that by just selecting the data just like you would any audio data, and you do get audible feedback as I'm selecting. Maybe this note here I'd like to delete, so you just select and delete. Now our controller lanes, which is what you see here, you can see that we have 2 right now by default. There's velocity, which is going to be the volume of each individual note. So you can see that I can increase or decrease that volume of the selected note, or I can do the same for the group of notes that I've selected. And below that, we have our MIDI volume lane, but you can click and choose any other MIDI controller. As you can see here, we can add or remove, and we'll get the entire list of MIDI controllers, but there are some commonly used ones already listed for you here. So let's see what happens when we add a second track and how we can manage multiple virtual instrument tracks. So I'm going to go to track new, and I'm going to again choose stereo, choose instrument track, ticks. I'll name this instrument 2, and we will create our track. I'll move it up here above our metronome. And again, the process is repeated where we click on inserts, click on instruments so that we see our list of instruments, and then we choose another synth. So it'll show up here. You can see on your inserts, I'll load an instrument and pick a preset, and there we go. So now, in order to record enable so we can hear sound out of this specific instrument, I just simply click record enable on instrument 2. So now you can see that audio is coming out of this second instrument audio channel here. So now let's record some data on our second instrument that we just loaded. I'll make sure that our timeline is at 0. I'm actually going to leave our metronome muted, as you can see here. So we'll free record, or I'll kind of record to what we previously have recorded. So I'll arm record there and hit play. Great. I'll hit stop, and you can see that the MIDI data was created as we were recording. Again, if I double click, you can see our piano roll or key editor, and we can manipulate it as we would like. Now, let's go ahead and add a MIDI track as opposed to an instrument track so that you can see how we can use those in conjunction with our instruments that we've created. So we will go to track, new. This time we're going to select MIDI track, and there is no choice of mono and stereo as it's just MIDI data. We are going to leave our time base in ticks, music-based time base, and we'll leave it as the name MIDI. Create our track. So now what you see here is a track that is not associated with any specific instrument. We would need to actually route it so that it is linked to one of our two created instruments. So you see here in this slot where it says all, that's the MIDI input. And we're going to leave that to all because it basically means that any MIDI data being input, in this case it's the MIDI controller keyboard that I'm using, it will be sent to this MIDI channel if we record enable. Now what's important here is to select this output where it's going to be sent to. You do see that we have our instrument 1 and instrument 2 here selected. Now instrument 1 only has one MIDI channel, so there is no drop down box, but you see that this second instrument in instrument 2 does have the ability to load multiple instruments, use multiple MIDI channels. But right now we have our one synth loaded as MIDI channel 1. So if we would like to control that synth in instrument 2, we would choose that as the routing. Now, if I record enable, you'll see that we're actually going to trigger instrument 2, and you'll see audio come out of here in instrument 2. So if I wanted to record another line, but do it on a separate MIDI event, have its own track down here, this is how I could achieve that. I would have my new MIDI data here, but it would still be triggering instrument 2. And at the same rate, if we wanted to do that, but triggering instrument 1, we would again just go to our output selector, change it to instrument 1, and now you'll see that when I play my MIDI controller, we're actually triggering audio in instrument 1 over here. So if I press record and leave this MIDI channel triggering instrument 1, so let's move this here so it makes a bit more sense, we're going to basically add a second line to this specific instrument. So let's go back again to the start of our timeline, arm our recording, press play. Now let's say I didn't like that, I wasn't happy with that, simply delete, or maybe I would actually want to test that out and have it sent to our second instrument instead of our instrument 1. I can, of course, go here. Maybe I hit some wrong notes. I can edit all of my MIDI or individual notes, choose where in the timeline they land, maybe delete a few and see the results. Great. And that's how you can work with virtual instrument tracks as well as MIDI tracks in Pro Tools.